What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another live stream. And oh boy, today I'm super excited to be here. Christian, what's up? Nice to see you. George, nice to see you. Agent, nice to see you. Today we are live with one of my favorite JavaScript developers. Today I'm going to introduce you to Avenue, the creator of Vue.js. Dude, thank you so much for coming. You are absolutely awesome.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
And yeah, chat, today, by the way, chat, let me know if the audio is okay, if you can see Avenue properly, if everything is just perfect. But yeah, today we are chatting with one of my favorite JavaScript developers ever. Avenue, the creator of Vue.js and Vite, and honestly, one of the most humble persons I have ever met. Dude, you literally have 1 million GitHub stars, and you are still the most super humble person I know. If I had 1 million GitHub stars, I probably wouldn't be that humble, man. It's crazy.
Well, I don't think I actually have 1 million. We'll maybe have a quarter of that.
You do have a bunch, though. So, appreciate you being so kind. Even when you were golfing together, it was super fun to just be with you, okay?
Yeah.
Chat, again, let me know if everything is perfect regarding the sound, regarding the audio, if you can hear Avenue properly, and if everything looks perfect. But on my side, everything looks okay. I think, we are going to have a 40 to an hour interview today. And Evan, I prepared this during the weekend. And one of the first things I noticed is that you actually, worked at Google. So I want to know, how do you end up joining Google, and what kind of stuff were you actually doing there?
Yeah. So before Google was actually my first job out of school. So I went to school. This kind of goes a bit back, right? A lot of people probably know my undergrad degree was in art history. It's not related to computer science. That was one of the trivia questions they asked during the golf.
And I didn't know the answer.
Yeah, but yeah. So art turns out art history degree wasn't really helpful at landing a job out of college. So I did a graduate school program in New York at Parsons called Master of Fine Arts in Design and Technology. So that was a hybrid program where we played around with all kind of weird technologies, like open frameworks. I don't know if anyone knows that, but it's a framework that allows you to build these interactive animations, canvas-like stuff, but with C++. And then there was like processing, Arduino. We also learned a bit of like interface design. So it was a mix of all these different things. It was really fun, actually. Really, really intense. But at that time, we were asked to build these. We were not really like restricted to say use which format for our like actual projects. So I was like, I kind of hate these compiled languages because like with open frameworks, you compile the thing and it only works on your machine, right? And if you like say you compile on Mac and it wouldn't work on someone else's Windows machine, right? And when you try to present, like you actually have to take your own machine there to be
Oh
able to
no.
present your stuff. Yeah. So I was like, it would be so much easier if it's just a web page, right? And around that time, Google started doing a lot of like crazy Chrome experiments, right? That's what made me realize, oh, like you can actually do fancy stuff with JavaScript directly in the browser. So I was like, I want to learn JavaScript. So that's how I taught myself JavaScript. So I started building these Canvas experiments, CSS3 stuff. I actually built this clone of a to-do app called Clear using web technologies.
The clear app that you do like swipes and things like. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I cloned the thing interaction only with HTML and CSS and JavaScript. Uh, it actually got pretty popular. I think that actually got me in a few like internship offers. Um, and I actually flew to California to interview for an internship position at Facebook, which unfortunately kind of I don't know if it's good or not, but it didn't work out. So I was like, the interview was like crazy hard. They actually expected a real engineer. There's like prototype chain. What is that? So I went back. I was like, hey, actually, I realized I don't know that much about JavaScript and engineering in general. So I started to be more serious about that. And eventually, when I was out of school, I actually I built this portfolio site that I just put all my random stuff on there. Also had a GitHub profile, which may or may not helped. But then I got a call from someone one day, and it was like, it's actually a call from a recruiter at Google Creative Labs. And so Google Creative Labs is like this internal creative agency inside Google. Um, it's a mix of multiple different things. They actually run some ad campaigns, right? But more of those ad campaigns use more elements of technology. For example, the whole campaign may be actually a website, right, that they built, right? Or it could be some interactive stuff that you put on billboards. I think one of the famous things they did was a fully interactive music video that runs in your browser with Vue.js. Miss Dube actually was working for Creative Labs as a contractor, as part of the data arts team back then. So we actually also I actually met him in person for the first time at a Google Creative Lab offsite. So that was like my meeting the hero moment for me back then. Yeah. But yeah, so they called me and they're like, hey, we have this Fiverr program that basically Creative Labs selects 5 new graduates every year. And the team is made up of 5 different roles. They have one copywriter, one graphic designer, one motion designer, one strategist, basically kind of like the project manager, and then a creative technologist. So I was the creative technologist. So they're like, are you interested? I'm like, hell yeah. This is like the best job I could have imagined
Oh yeah.
out of school. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I just, so that's how I joined Google. So interestingly, the work we did, like I said, it was a creative technologist. So the work is a bit more oriented towards just trying weird stuff in the browser. Uh, it was mostly internal because like what I spent most of the time did was just building prototypes for these experimental interactions. Like our creative director would just come into the office and say, "Hey, I have this crazy idea. Like, what would search look like in 10 years?" Then we were just like, "Yeah, let's try this, let's try that," and we need to build it really fast. But luckily, everything only needs to run in Chrome. Actually, only run in Chrome Canary. So like we can use all the new experimental APIs. That's like doesn't work in IE at all. We're like we don't care.
It's
So
kind
that
of
was like really really fun.
it's kind of fun that you actually became good during experiments because now you build your own bundler, and now you are doing crazy experiments too at VoidZero, and we are going to jump into all of that. Before we jump to the next question, chat, if you are enjoying today's conversation with Evan Yu, make sure you subscribe the channel and like this video. Okay, we're going to have a bunch of Vue.js content in the future, so make sure you subscribe this channel so you can see more about that. Dude, and still at this period of Google, I know that you end up creating Vue.js. Not the Vue.js that we know today, but probably more like a proof of concept. But I want to ask you, like, what prompted you to make Vue.js in the first place?
Yeah, I think around that time, like I said, we're building a lot of these prototypes, right? Some of them are pure graphics. Some of them involved interfaces. So when we built those interfaces, originally I was just hand rolling them with HTML and JavaScript. And over time, I realized, okay, like this is not sustainable, not maintainable, and also like very tedious. I did write a decent amount of jQuery soup, right? Until I realized like this is not the way, right? So I'm just looking around for how to build more maintainable interfaces, right? So I tried a bit of Backbone. One of my coworkers started using AngularJS, the version 1.
Version 1, yeah.
The original Angular. Yeah. So around that time, I looked into AngularJS and I was like, well, there are some interesting bits about this, but like there's also a lot of stuff I just don't understand why we even need them. Yeah, for me, I was totally just coming from my own use case. I'm like, we just need to build this thing really fast. We don't like also it's just an embedded interface on top of the experiment, right? We don't want this whole model controller stuff. Like just give me the template and the model and the data, right? So essentially that's when I started thinking, hey, I just want to have only this part, right? How can I replicate this with my own stuff? So I started looking into how Angular does it, and turns out I was like, I don't like this. I don't like the way it was done. So I'm like, there must be a better way. Because Angular does this thing called dirty checking, right? Essentially, every time you change something, it just like try to guess you probably have changed something and just like diff the old state and new state and try to figure out what changed. That's called dirty checking. So I was like, we should have a way for you to actually detect when things have changed, right? So around that time, ES5 was like kind of started to be the baseline. And in ES5, there's an API called Object Defined Property that allows you to intercept the get and set operations.
Oh, right.
Yeah, yeah. So that was not available in IE 8 and below, right? That's why. And Angular, I believe the original version of Angular supported all the way back to IE 6 or something. So that's the limitation. So I was like, hey, if we can use getters and setters, then we can just like know when the user changed something or accessed something. So we can track when the user accesses a property. We can also know when they just changed something, right? So now everything becomes, you can just change, user can just like do this.foo equals bar and things will just work. So why don't we build that? So that's how Vue started.
And it's kind of insane that you mentioned like you wanted something more simple. I totally relate to that because I remember like in 2015, we at the Laravel community, we were seeing all these new frameworks coming to the scene, like Angular and React, and we thought, well, we want to leverage some of that reactivity, but at the same time, it was so difficult, man. Like, we were looking at all these
Yeah.
bundlers, all this story, it was such a mess. We couldn't, like, literally understand anything about that. But I remember, like, Taylor just coming with this tweet, which we are going to talk about in a second, where I just tried Vue, and it's so simple, and it was like literally dropping a CDN and bam, new Vue app, and it's done. And it felt like so freshing, honestly, for we Laravel developers. And it's kind of funny that all this Vue story in the early days was so tight. It's so closely close to the Laravel community because literally Taylor tweeted that he was into Vue, and suddenly you have all this Laravel community trying Vue.js and asking what is Vue.js. So I want to ask you like about that period in particular. What did you felt when you saw Taylor is tweet, but also, did you know anything about PHP and Laravel at the time?
Actually, not much. Yeah, so I think I did write a little bit of PHP when I was in school.
Let's go.
I did like maybe one project with it.
Okay.
I didn't use any framework. I was using it literally as a scripting language. It's like just embedding a bunch of PHP in HTML. That was it. But I like one thing I liked about it is like you don't need a very complex setup, right?
Yeah,
it's
just
just like
works.
you write the PHP file and it kind of works.
Yeah.
Um, I think around that time, Laravel probably wasn't as dominant as it is today because I think back then I still remember like Code Igniter,
Yeah.
Zen framework,
Correct.
a bunch of things like that. But obviously, it was still much bigger than Vue, which was just like completely new, right? So I looked into this Laravel thing. I'm like, looks like it's very popular. We might be onto something here. This Taylor Otwell guy, he looks very well respected.
Oh yeah.
Has a lot of followers. So I was like, well, cool. So yeah, I actually went to the 2016 Laracon. Yeah, that was like second edition probably. Yeah. And that talk was literally just like introducing Vue.js to you guys. Yeah.
A bunch of us were using it already because I remember like it was used on Spark, so people literally were copying Taylor's code to see, to use them in their apps. But really, Vue felt really fresh for us. And, Vue 1 dropped in October 2015 with the very first stable release and templating syntax and reactivity system. Then we have Vue 2 in October 2016. And Vue 2 really became mainstream at that moment. And it was still competing with things like frameworks from Facebook and frameworks from Google, Angular and React, which is crazy. And fast forward 4 years, in 2020, we had Vue 3 with TypeScript support, smaller bundlers, and the big thing, the composition API. So I want to ask you a few things about this. Because still today on my live streams, you'll find this funny, but on my live streams, people come to me and say, I use the options API. It feels better. I'm used to it. And so I want to ask you, like, what was your goal with the composition API and what problems does it solve?
Yeah, so it's a combination of multiple things. The first is the Vue's user base. It's dynamic, right? So we started probably, like say the very first version of Vue was purely runtime. You pulled it from a CDN. It's just a single script file, right? Later on, when it got a bit more complicated, right? We started having Vue single file components. We have Vue router. We have state management, right? A lot of things were introduced for single page applications because web dev kind of changed, right? I think in the very early days, most people are just like server rendering some HTML, then sprinkle JavaScript on top of it. Right?
Yeah,
That's probably still it works. It's a very simple mental model if you have relatively simple interactions on your client side, right? But then people start building different kind of applications on the web. People started building things like Gmail or like Notion or Linear, right? These things doesn't really work that well if you're doing still like rendering every page on the server and like jump between these routes. So you need to build single page applications, much more complex client-side state management and all that, right? Applications started to grow, get bigger, and people are building these kind of apps with Vue as well, right? So now we have a kind of mixed group of users who are used to different mental models. I think a lot of people who still prefer Options API probably still build apps that's primarily server rendered and don't have that kind of heavy client interaction, which is completely legit, right? There are still many kind of apps that would this is probably the best way to build a certain group of apps. But there are also a group of users, Vue users, who are running into scaling problems with Options API when they're trying to build these really complex, heavy client-side apps. So that is the main problem we're trying to tackle. So we realize, okay, there are two main issues. One is Options API, when your components gets really, really big, it just becomes really, really hard to refactor or just break out small parts of a God component out of into self-contained units, right? Code reuse also is an issue because mixings works if it's just like used occasionally, but if mixings becomes your main way of reusing logic, you run into situations where a single component have like 4 to 5 different mixings, right? And when you do this.foo, you have no idea where that comes from, right? It could be from any one of those mixings,
Right.
So composition API gives you a more clean way to encapsulate logic, right? So when you use a composable, you explicitly know which function returned it. And also, if you have a big component using composition API, you can just move and shift things around and then eventually extract it into an external composable without much sort of overhead per se. Right? So this really improves the flexibility when you're dealing in refactoring with large code bases. And part of that is also inspired by React hooks because we both Svelte 3's API and Composition API are in part inspired by React hooks because the composability aspect of it. Right? So when we shipped Composition API, people started creating libraries like Vue use, which proves to be really, really useful. And another aspect of it is Composition API is also more type friendly. So one of the main goals of Vue 3 is to improve TypeScript support. In the past, Vue 2 struggled with TypeScript because Options API were not designed with types in mind, right? This kind of way of like merging data from multiple sources onto a single object, like TypeScript struggles with that.
So it wasn't really static analyzable, you mean, the Options API? It was difficult to static analyze the code.
It is very difficult to write the right internal types so that all the data sources merge properly together.
Right.
So I don't know how many you have looked into the type inference code in Vue. Like probably 80% of the complexity comes from Options API, supporting Options API.
Right.
And mixings. So it was we actually had to TypeScript actually implemented a type called this type, partially motivated by enabling better type support in Vue 2. Because without this type, there was just no way for us to actually write a type that works, that would properly merge all the like mixings, computed data all together on the same this context. Right. So to this day, we have to keep all that type inference code in Vue 3 because we're not dropping Options API. But switching to Composition API, things becomes very, very easy because Composition API is just function calls. And TypeScript is really good at just function calls. You just type the return properly and it just infers everything very naturally. So that's also one of the motivation we did that.
Yeah, and I'm honestly, I find both APIs really easy to use. Probably if you were to ask me now, probably would go to the Composition API because like it feels more modern.
I think the story of landing it is just like, let's say if it lands as polished as it is today, it will probably be much easier for people to accept. I think but we landed over time. First, there was this whole controversy. Like we started with when we started talking about Vue 3 design, we first started with the class API, which we designed it, and halfway through, we were like, this relies too heavily on decorators. And decorators, the spec was stage 2. The language spec was stage 2. It was like very volatile. Like we're like, we don't even know how it's gonna look like in 3 years. So it felt very, very risky to base the class API design on decorators. So, and then we went with a composition API, but then initially there was this miscommunication where we said, oh, we're gonna deprecate options API. This is gonna be the only API forward. And people went nuts. They're like, how can you do this? Some people still kind of hold this grudge against us because of that. So to this day, I still get questions, all the questions like, will you ever deprecate options API? And every time I have to say, no, it's gonna be here forever. But anyway, yeah. So options API. So we propose this, then we implement a composition API. But then initially, we have to make it work in single file components, right? You had to actually use setup function to return all the bindings, which was very verbose. So it was not until 3.2 with shipped script setup that eventually kind of made using composition API in single file components much more pleasant. But that also took us quite a bit of time to work that out.
Dude, on the topic of Vue 3, at Laracon US, I saw your talk, and you mentioned vapor mode and alien signals coming to Vue 3.6. I was wondering, if you could explain these two to the regular Laravel user who is using Vue in the very simple way, what this will represent for existing users, if they will have to change anything, or what exactly is vapor mode and alien signals in the very simple way.
Yeah. So signals is just really another way of calling the reactivity system in Vue. Right? That's the system that tracks what you have used, what have changed. So it triggers the right updates. So just think of signals as reactivity system. Alien signals. So for the context, signals is the reactivity system that signals, which is equivalent to signals, is now widely used in many different frameworks. Right? Angular has signals, Preact has signals, Solid.js uses signals. So there's actually an effort in TC39 to standardize signals as a JavaScript language feature. So alien signals started out as Johnson, who is a Vue team member, experimenting with a lightweight signal implementation for his own use. It turns out he just built the fastest signal implementation in existence, and the benchmarks. So
you mean that Vue has the fastest implementation of signals?
Now in 3.6, yes.
3.6, interesting.
Yeah, so Vue's own reactivity system went through multiple rewrites over the years, right? So version 0.x, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and then during the 3.0 stage, we rewrote it twice between 3.4 and 3.5. Yeah, so alien signals is the latest iteration, and we have this benchmark where it just in terms of memory usage and performance is just best in class. We actually have a version of that to act as the official the signal polyfill for the language proposal as well. So that's gonna land in 3.6. The nice thing is it's 100% backwards compatible, so nothing changes, just better performance. Yeah,
that's awesome. So existing Vue users literally get that for free.
Yeah, we did the 3.4, 3.5 internal refactors, right? Nobody noticed, right? We just made it faster, but every time we just try to make everything, because since Vue 3, we're hey, any change we ship, it needs to be compatible.
Yeah.
Right? We have this thing called ecosystem CI that just every commit we can run it against downstream projects. So let's say Vuetify or Vue use, every commit in Vue, we run the change against their test suites. So we don't break them, right? So if we do a release, we make sure all the ecosystem tests pass. So that's very important.
And I think people really appreciate that that is literally a shift in mentality of the JavaScript ecosystem. You can see that on Vue, but also on React, that these framework authors literally are making an effort to keep things compatible over years, which was necessarily not the case back in 2015, where you would see, major breaking changes coming to these frameworks, and now everything seems much more stable than it was before.
Yeah, it definitely matured and sort of, I would say, can't find the right word, but I think it has to do with the stage of the ecosystem and the projects, right? So when I was just starting out with Vue, we had very few users. So like 0.x and 1.0, we changed the template syntax in multiple places, right? But after 1.0, we rarely ever change the template syntax anymore because everyone's like has muscle memory of how Vue templates work now, right? So for Vue 3 was still kind of like, we basically like, this is kind of like our last opportunity to do these like crazy big changes. So after Vue 3, we also saw, okay, like people really get pissed if you change, you ship breaking changes. So yeah, so our priority right now is really like keep Vue on Vue 3 for as long as we can, right?
So you
we want
mentioned
to like just
you mentioned alien signals. You mentioned focus on stability. How about vapor mode? What this is and how people can opt in potentially? What this is exactly?
So vapor mode is just so at the very high level, vapor mode is a different compilation strategy, which means you take the exact same Vue component, single file component, we compile it to something different. That's right. Right now, your templates in Vue single file components, we compile it into what we call virtual DOM render functions. So underlying rendering mechanism is virtual DOM with a bit of compiler hints. So that's kind of like React, but a bit more performant because we are able to analyze the template to do more things. Vapor mode essentially just ditches virtual DOM altogether. So it just compiles into something that looks very different. It almost looks like the optimal JavaScript you would write by hand. Let's say initialize this big piece of DOM, static DOM fragment, then find this specific node, set up a reactive update effect on top of it. Right? So this is like how you would, if you were to write the most optimal code by hand, that's how you would write it. But vapor mode just generates that from your templates. Right? So this just makes the updates much more efficient and memory efficient as well. So it's mostly performance gains again, right? And also, vapor mode supports a subset of Vue APIs. So it supports only single file components, only script setup, only composition API. So it's a much narrower subset. So in a way, it's our attempt to sort of say, give us an alternative opportunity to say, let's refine it down to this kind of minimal subset that only works in vapor mode with better performance, because that's kind of the prerequisite, right? We do realize like over years, Vue has accumulated a lot of APIs, right? We have options API, we have composition API, even composition API, we have multiple different ways of using it, right? And sometimes newcomers complain about that. They're like there's so many different ways to use Vue, like which one should I pick, right? But again, like I said, stability is important. So we don't really want to say, hey, we're just going to drop options API. We're just going to drop this way of using things, right? So vapor mode kind of gives us like, if you opt into it, here is a new minimal subset like you have to stick to, which is fully compatible with how it works today, right? But it's just much more performant. Sticking to the subset also gives us more optimization opportunities because let's say certain things you can only analyze when you're using, say, script setup or single file components, when you put your code and your template together. So the constraints actually give us more ability to optimize your code better, right? So vapor mode is pretty much that. And it's designed to be completely opt-in, which means it doesn't affect anything you use today. And in fact, you can say you have a huge application, you have one page that's suffering from performance problems. You can opt into vapor mode for that page only. And that page works much faster, but all your existing code just works. We also try to make vapor mode as compatible in terms of behavior with virtual DOM, right? But again, because the rendering mechanism is very different underneath, right? So we can't say like it would be 100% exactly the same, but we give you ways to sort of contain it within and apply it only where you think it makes sense. So you can decide how much you want to migrate, or maybe you want to start a whole new application with Vapor mode only, that is also possible.
Okay, it's crazy, dude. Like literally, people are getting this for free. Plus, the vapor mode is something people can opt in, because literally there is a change in behavior. Therefore, people can opt in if they want to. Dude, Vue 3.6 looks exciting. So congrats on on that effort. I want to jump a little bit into Vite. Vite is not anymore a bundler. So around the Vue 3 era, you also built Vite, which is a wonderful piece of software, I must say, and it became to be a bundler, but now is also a build kit for building meta frameworks like Nuxt, Kit, Solid Start, and more. So maybe, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit this concept of meta framework to my audience, which probably is not very familiar with, but at the same time, explain why Vite became agnostic to begin with, like why Vite is supporting all these various frameworks that maybe are not even using Vue to begin with.
Yeah. So meta framework in JavaScript land is really just fancy term for framework because we had JavaScript originally. JavaScript only runs in the browser. So when we like 10 years ago when we talk about a JavaScript framework, people defaults to a client only framework, right? But then we have Node.js. People can start running JavaScript on the clients on the server side. So now you can actually build a JavaScript framework that runs on both server and client. But to differentiate from client-side only frameworks, which people already kind of associate the word framework with, now we have meta frameworks. Basically, it's just full stack JavaScript frameworks. Yeah. Yeah. And most of these frameworks wrap a base framework, right? So Nuxt kind of is built on top of Vue. Next is built on top of React. Kit is built on top of Svelte. So that's the relationship here. So framework is the base client-side only rendering framework, and then the meta framework is the more opinionated, more full stack version of
right. And now Vite,
but it's not always by the same team.
And now Vite is being used to build many of those meta frameworks. So on that topic,
Exactly.
like, why did you make Vite agnostic? Was something that was thought to begin with? What was your thinking over there?
Yeah. So initially, I made Vite I made Vite only for Vue. Right?
Okay.
Because we maintain something called Vue CLI, which is this very heavy CLI for building single page applications, and it was based on Webpack, and we had a heavy abstraction on top of it, which, looking back, it made it really slow. So one day I was like working with the user reproduction, which used Vue CLI, and I was just installing, waiting for these npm dependencies to install, and then starting the dev server. I'm like, man, this is so slow. I can't take it anymore. I gotta find a better way to do this. So I started playing around with the idea of a dev server that just transpiles Vue components on the fly. So when you send an HTTP request, you actually send a HTTP request to a Vue file, and the server would compile it into JavaScript on the spot and send the JavaScript back. So you request a Vue file, but you get back JavaScript.
The hot reload is even today, when I see it, I just get such a magic piece of feature we have here, man. The hot reload is, I don't know if it was something before Vite, but definitely my first time using hot reload was with Vite, and it felt really good.
Okay, yeah. So Webpack was the first bundler to come up with hot module replacement. Right, that's what we relied on to implement it in Vue CLI. But Webpack's implementation had an issue where the hot updates would also get slower as your app gets bigger.
Oh.
Somehow, like, it's not O1, it's like ON. So it just, like, the performance just gets worse and worse as you work on your app. Right. But with Vite, the HMR implementation was over native ES modules, and we were able to make it essentially directly proportional to the changes that you've made. So if you make a small change, it will only invalidate the modules that's directly affected by that change, the import change. So it's usually like 3 to 4 modules. So it almost always finishes in like 100 milliseconds, which feels almost instant. So that is probably the biggest thing that Vite kind of unlocked, and now it's kind of become table stakes for build tools, right? Webpack actually were kind of improved their HMR performance as well because they saw, like Vite actually does it it can do this, right? So its HMR performance actually got better over time as well. So but definitely like my original motivation was like I want fast HMR. I want it to be instant,
Yeah.
right? I want my servers to start up, dev servers to start fast. Um, and that initially was only for Vue, but as I worked on it, we were refactoring and we actually got Vite to 1.0 RC. Like we went through alpha, beta, RC, and we were about to release it, and then I saw this. Then I started thinking about I was also thinking about production build, right? Because you need production build, which means you will need we were using rollup for production builds. And then I saw this idea. Jason Miller, who's also author of Preact, came up with this project called WMR, which implemented something called a rollup plugin container that is able to run rollup plugins without actually running rollup. So when I saw that, it just kind of clicked with me again. I'm like, okay, if we do something similar, we can use rollup for production build, and then we can run the plugin container in the dev server. Now we can support rollup plugins for both production and dev. So to validate the idea, I turned my Vue logic, extracted Vue logic, and implemented it in as a Vue plugin. Right? Once I have that as a plugin, I realize, okay, now the core is actually framework agnostic. It's not coupled to Vue anymore. We have a great plugin API that can support any framework. So I'm like, let's just make this framework agnostic then. So I actually just ditched the whole 1.0 code base and we just restarted rewriting the thing from the ground up, and that became Vite 2. So we actually never released Vite 1.0.
That's a fun story.
There was only Vite 2. Yeah.
It's crazy, man. And honestly, I wish in PHP world we had something like a hot model replacement too. Every time I would change, for example, blade code. We don't have that yet, but maybe in the future. We're going to jump into the second the second part of this interview. By the way, chat, if you just arrived, my name is Nuno Maduro. Today, with the creator of Vue.js here on the channel. If you're enjoying this conversation, please make sure you put like on the button below, but also subscribe my channel for more updates on Vue.js. Jude, I want to jump a little bit into talk a little bit about Nuxt. And I don't know if you saw, but I actually tried Nuxt and Next literally last week. And I must confess that I found Nuxt a little bit better because it felt less opinionated than Next, less boilerplate, less things by default. But I did notice that Next didn't came with Vite, unlike Nuxt, Astro, Svelte, and Solid Start. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think they go with TurboPack by default? Do they have anything that is specific to TurboPack? What do you think about this?
There's a long story here because so Next.js is probably the OG JS meta framework, right? Nuxt was actually created inspired by Next. So Next kind of paved the way. They did a lot of their own thing. So they have very heavy abstractions on top of Webpack, customizations, custom compilation, a lot of stuff, which makes it really, really tightly coupled to Webpack, right? So over time, they also started, I think they started investing in the TurboPack idea before Vite really became mainstream, right? So around the time they started working on TurboPack, Vite was probably still the new kid on the block. It's not fully proven, and for Vercel, there was really no reason to bet on it just yet, right? So they made a really big bet on TurboPack because they believe, okay, we're gonna hire the author of Webpack, right, and rebuild a better bundler with Rust. Turns out that took much longer than they hoped. And over the time, we actually had multiple conversations with Vercel about I was like, hey, if you guys want to rebuild it on Vite, we can collaborate. We actually even built a prototype that replicated a lot of Next.js API on top of Vite. But the challenging part is they did the TurboPack thing and the Next 15, which is very deeply intertwined with React Server components at the same time. So at that time, the React Server components was designed to require bundler integration. They actually had a special thing that hooks into Webpack to do what React Server components needed because it needs multiple compiler passes to collect the server component call sites and then transform it. It's very, very complicated, right? So Vite, they just didn't have the ability to make it work simultaneously for two bundlers, two
Right.
different compiler architectures. Also because of Vite's unbundled dev server, which makes it even more complicated for them to support. So it just kind of never was a good timing for them to actually do it. Right? They're also so deeply invested in TurboPack, it would be really awkward if they pulled out and then say we're gonna rebound on Vite, which is very, very risky because they have a lot of production customers running in
On
production.
TurboTax. Yeah.
Yeah, and rebuilding on Vite, like you can imagine, it's gonna be a very, very risky move. Right?
It's
So I kind of
too late.
understand.
Yeah, it's just too
Yeah,
late.
it's just unfortunately, it's just never. There's never a good timing for Next to actually consider moving to Vite,
Right.
and they just kind of have to keep investing into TurboPack.
You mentioned like they they hire the author of Webpack, but also they hired also a bunch of other people at the same time. The author of
Yeah,
Svelte.
it's actually there.
It's actually crazy over there. And on this topic of Vercel, I wanted to ask you like, Nuxt today is one of the most popular ways of building Vue apps, and I saw that Nuxt Labs, which does a lot of work for Nuxt, is literally got acquired by Vercel.
Yep.
So
Yep.
how is the relation currently with the Vue team and the Nuxt team in highlight of all of this?
So the relationship really didn't change at all. So Nuxt team has always been its kind of own independent team. So there's a certain overlap. Say Anthony, he's both on Nuxt and he's also on Vue team. But primarily, the separation between Vue and Nuxt in terms of team structure is pretty clean. So Vue focuses mostly on just the rendering framework and component layer, whereas Nuxt team primarily focus on the meta framework layer, which is how do you start a full stack server? How do you make the front end and back end work together? How do you deploy to different platforms, etc. Which I'm happy for them to take charge of that part, so I don't have to worry about it. So after the acquisition, one important thing is obviously everybody when they hear about the acquisition, what they worry is the evil company going to like squeeze them for money and try to like force every Nuxt user to deploy on Vercel. I think that fear, at least for now, has proven to be unwarranted because Vercel actually is very explicit about their intention of the acquisition. Is they want to. I also, from my understanding, is Vercel actually wants to diversify. It does not want to be viewed as the company that only supports Next.js, because Next.js, while being their biggest lead generator, right? But Vercel is the framework agnostic platform, right? So people will argue, like, say Next.js has like platform locking, blah blah blah. But Vercel as a platform, right? It supports everything. It supports all the frameworks, and it wants to support Svelte. It wants to support Nuxt. It wants to support Vite as well. So they actually in a way, I think acquiring Nuxt actually is an attempt to show people, hey, like we actually support different frameworks. It's not just React. It's not just Next.js. And if you think about that, right, if they want people to actually believe that, they have to do it by show the action. So I think that actually guarantees, that more or less like forces them to actually need to treat Nuxt team, take good care of it, right?
Yeah.
Allow it to keep working on Nuxt, allow it to have the freedom to explore the directions, and I think they're doing that, right?
Yeah.
So I've actually talked to Sebastian, talked to Daniel about the acquisition afterwards. So I think Vercel is keeping their words. They also one thing I'm happy about for the Nuxt team is because Nuxt is a company, right? They also need to make money to make it sustainable, and it's hard, right? It's very difficult monetizing a framework without building hosting. So surprisingly, it's not surprising, but Nuxt team never got into hosting. So other ways of monetizing the framework is very, very challenging, right? They tried multiple different things, which I would say is not working as well as say Laravel Forge or Vercel, right? So after they're acquired, Vercel actually just made all their like commercial products free. So basically, Vercel is like you can stop worrying about making money now. Just focus on the framework, which from my perspective, that's a good thing for the Nuxt team.
Yeah, it's a good thing, and I was pleased to see that. Basically, when I clicked on the deployment section on the Nuxt documentation, I got suggested with various deployment platforms, and not only Vercel.
Yep.
There was like
Yeah,
20
definitely.
of them.
Yeah.
So that was, I was happy to see that.
Yeah, so one thing is Nuxt team is also the team behind Nitro, which is a Nitro is essentially this thing that allows you to write the same code but deploy it to like many, many different platforms. And Vercel acquired Nuxt, which also includes Nitro, and they're actually pushing Nitro quite heavily, interestingly. So yeah, so in a way, Vercel is actually so far what they're doing, right? Like, because I think everyone will have their own opinions, but so the common thing we can agree on is what Vercel has done so far to Nuxt.
It's
There's really
positive.
no, yeah, it's positive.
Talking about changing a little bit of topics here, you recently founded VoidZero, which is a company dedicated to build the next generation of toolchain for JavaScript. And again, do you mind of breaking this down a little bit for the regular PHP developer? What does it mean to Vue and Vite today? Where this whole idea came from? What exactly is VoidZero at the moment?
Yeah, so we know like so the main thing is people are building bigger and bigger JavaScript apps, right? There's also TypeScript, so the tooling aspect of JavaScript has historically been very, very fragmented, right? So PHP developers, especially Laravel devs, right? You're very used to just use Laravel. It has everything, right? Right. Every problem you can think of, Laravel kind of has something for you. So
Correct.
you don't need to like say, but things were different for JavaScript developers. When you start a new project, you kind of have to like, which linter do I use? Which test runner do I use? Which formatter do I use? Which framework do I use? Which this, that, and X library do I use?
In the 1,000
Right?
options for every single one of those sections. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And then on top of that, you have to make it all work with TypeScript. You have to make it all work with monorepos. You have to make these tools work with one another.
Yeah.
And then when you bump a dependency, it just becomes incompatible with B and vice versa. It just happens all the time. So I myself have been dealing with this kind of issues all these years. So when we had Vite, I was like, okay, Vite is getting really, really popular, but I still have to use this, and this, right? What if, like, for example, like when Vite just came out, we still have to use Jest as the test runner, which is pest kind of similar to. But Jest doesn't work well with Vite because Jest had its own like transformer configuration. It's like CJS based on internally, and then it cannot reuse any of the transform plugins that we had for Vite. So one day I was like, so people actually have to like first configure Vite and then configure Jest. Two different configurations, two different set of dependencies. And it was just like, I was like, well, we need something that just works native with Vite. So I jokingly said, hey, we need to build the Vite test runner. And then a few days later, Anthony Fu just like said, hey, I built this thing called VTest.
That guy is a machine, right? Apparently, like every time I see on Twitter, he comes with something like crazy.
Yeah, he maintains so many different stuff. So then we have VTest, right? So the way VTest works is it understands the Vite configuration. So all your like module resolution or your transform plugins, it just works in VTest. Same config. So like by default, if you have a Vite application, you can just add a VTest, write a test file, and everything just works. It's also blazing fast because of Vite. So that kind of got me started thinking, hey, like, what if we can start with Vite as the center and we, build a unified toolchain so that people can no longer like having to assemble all these different things just to make a base application work, right? Like when people get started with Laravel, you don't need to pick like 5 different tools
No,
and
just
evaluate them and keep it upgraded over time. Similarly, like when people work on Rust, they just use
Oh yeah.
Cargo. And Cargo gives them everything, right? So why isn't there something like that for JavaScript? So that is pretty much what I had in mind. Like I wish new developers getting into JavaScript and TypeScript can have this experience where saying, hey, here's this one dependency, you install it, and you can just get started. You have dev, you have build, you have link, you have test, you have format, you have monorepo resolution, everything like that, right? So that is the vision, right? And I also realized, okay, like this is much, much bigger than Vite. I can't build it alone. So I'll have to have a team of people working on it. And part of the reason I started a company is also because I realized, okay, I've been working independently on Vue and Vite for all these years, right? The financial aspect of it is interesting because we see a lot of open source projects kind of struggle with donations and sponsorships. Vue is already an outlier that somehow we managed to pull in enough sponsorship to sustain the project over the years. But compared to a real business, that's still just very small amount of money, right? It's like nowhere near, say, having a full-time team of like 15 people working on something, right? So Vue is like sustainable, but it's not a real like business scale kind of thing. In order to support what we want to build here, it needs to be an actual business, which means there needs to be proper funding so people working on it can actually, they don't, like, essentially my role now for the company is really to like find the right people who want to work on these problems, are good at solving these problems, and make sure they don't need to worry about money. Make sure they can just focus on building the thing. So that's essentially what I'm doing now.
We are going to jump a little bit into that topic of how do you think VoidZero will actually make money? And we have 3 more questions before we end. Let me know how we are on time. Let me know because we are an hour in and I still have probably 10 to 15 minutes more questions, okay? When I was preparing this interview, I noticed that Vue is not actually included on the list of projects of VoidZero. So I wanted to ask you like what this actually means. So is Vue still an independent, fully community-driven project at the moment? And how much intention you, Avenue, will personally give to Vue in the future?
Sorry, what's the question again?
Yeah, so, when I was preparing this interview, I noticed that Vue is literally not under the list of projects of VoidZero.
Yeah.
So on this topic, I wanted to ask you, like, is Vue still something truly independent, fully community-driven, and how much attention you think you will give personally to Vue.js in the future?
Yeah, so I intentionally separate Vue from VoidZero.
Okay.
VoidZero is a company. It took investments, and it now owns the IP of projects like Vitest, Vite, OXC, etc. But Vue is still completely independent. It's like very, very strictly separated from VoidZero. So Vue now still runs on its own donations, open collective, etc. It still has its own team that takes, I still personally sponsor team members. Also, people take money from the open collective. So we still have people working on Vue full-time.
Full-time.
But yes, we have 2 people, Edison and Johnson, who are working full-time on Vue-related projects. The language server, language tools, Vapor mode, regular maintenance of Vue core, etc. So I myself, obviously, am spending a lot less time on actually writing code for Vue and also for the projects. In general, I'm writing less code now because running a company it's very
Challenging.
very, very challenging. Yeah. But so what I can do now is mostly, so I still wrote the majority. I would say I probably wrote at least half the code that's in Vapor mode now.
Oh,
Right?
wow.
So yeah, Vapor mode it took a really long time, right? I did the initial prototype. Kevin Den, who he worked on the initial he worked on the compiler side of Vapor Mode, the compiler initial compiler implementation, and he also did the initial port from the prototype to the initial version runtime. And then I essentially redid the runtime one time to further fine tune the performance. And now Edison has done a lot of follow up work on the compiler, both the compiler and the runtime. So it's a mix of this kind of work. So so I have to admit I have to spend a lot less time on Vue now, but partly that is because I believe Vue, its API in general, especially the default virtual DOM implementation, is in a pretty good place now, right? So also because we believe Vue is the priority of Vue right now is really just be stable and serve the users well. So I mean, there's still Edison is still working on the daily maintenance of fixing bugs, etc. But we don't really see a strong need to say come up with big fancy features like React server components. That's just not the direction we want Vue to go in, right? So things like Vapor Mode is really focused on giving you opt-in options to improve things where it makes sense, but not like the key is we don't want you to rewrite code. Right? We don't want people to have to rewrite Vue code. So that's really important, right? So a lot of that is me coming up, essentially setting the direction on like, say Vapor Mode is the thing we want to do. And then we have people working on it. We also have like people like Eduardo or other people still contributing part-time. Yeah. So that's the situation for Vue. But yeah, like I said, it's I intentionally keep it entirely separate from VoidZero because we don't want it. We don't want Vue to. It's kind of just my personal thing. I don't want Vue to ever have anything to do with VCs.
Yeah, it was super clear, man. And I think the community got they now know what will be the future of Vue. That is, the scope seems to be like almost done. It's a done framework basically, like in terms of new features. I mean. So all the people are getting now, it's like performance optimizations for free, stability, bug fixes, which looks awesome. Dude, the last question of this interview.
In a way,
go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of want to add a little bit. It's like say when I worked on Vite, right? It was like I started working on Vue 3 first, then halfway through I started working on Vite. And I basically spent like a whole year just working on Vite without continuing Vue 3, right? So that turns out to be a good detour because in a way I think like modern frameworks is more than just the framework itself. It's just the whole surrounding tooling around it, right? And in a way, the work on VoidZero eventually is going to benefit Vue users as well because everything we build at VoidZero, we make it framework agnostic. So one important thing we kind of want to tackle next is say make OX-linked work really well with Vue components, right? So so like everyone can have much faster Vue linting, for example.
Yeah, the story is very similar to Laravel in the sense that the framework itself, in terms of scope and features, is literally like done. But there is all this ecosystem Taylor keeps improving to make also the experience with Laravel better. Jude, on the topic of VoidZero, and I ask you this personally at Laracon US, so I don't know how much you can share publicly about this already, but one of the first things I noticed when I was reading the announcement of VoidZero is, but how the hell he going to pay salaries to these people? So do you have a plan to actually make money out of VoidZero?
Yeah, we do. So we are building something called V Plus, and it's an end-to-end toolchain that just combines a lot of these open source projects that we maintain, plus additional features on top of it. Right? These additional features are more enterprise oriented. So we're also going to try something creative around the licensing. So I don't want to go into too much details because some of it is still kind of, we may tweak it. So but the general idea is we want to make it very generously free, and the license terms will force some of the bigger for-profit companies to have to buy a license in order to use it. And they want to use it because there are certain features that is only in V Plus and would be also only beneficial to enterprise level use cases.
Interesting. That was super clear. So basically, you are giving
Yeah.
Vite and all these tools around Vite for free. But if you are an enterprise making millions, you can opt in
Exactly.
to have a little bit more features here and there around Vite.
Actually, it will be just one distribution. So we don't want to do open core where we have to arbitrarily draw a line to say this feature goes in, this feature is paid. So it's just the same V plus for everyone. The difference really is in the licensing terms, it will force more profitable companies to pay for it, but non-profits, open source, and individuals won't have to.
Okay, loud and clear. That was clear, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, we're about to wrap up. So I would like to finish with a quick game, if you don't mind. So I'm going to throw to you 5 rapid fire questions, and which one of those questions? So every single question will have 2 choices, and you have to pick one super fast. As example, if I say something like React or Vue, you would pick Vue right away without thinking. So the goal is that you don't think to these questions, and you just answer one or the other. Okay, you ready?
Okay.
All right, let's go. JavaScript or TypeScript?
TypeScript.
VS Code or Vim?
VS Code.
Twitter or Blue Sky?
Twitter.
Laravel or Rails?
Rails. That's a hard one because I don't use either of them. I would say Laravel.
Laravel, okay. Yes or no? Did Vercel ever try to hire you?
Yes. This actually is like a side story because Guillermo tried to hire me when they were only like fewer than 10 people.
Oh, wow.
That was like,
okay.
It was still called Vite, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
But I was like, yeah, I just want to keep working on Vue.
Okay, Evan, thank you so much for joining me today, dude. In chat, of course, if you enjoyed the conversation with Evan, please hit the like, subscribe. By the way, this live stream will probably become private so I can do some post-editing and you guys enjoy this interview with the maximum quality possible. And also, when the video comes out, be sure to hit that like, to subscribe, and also to share what you think about Vue, Vite, in the direction of Vue.js in general. Evan, thank you so much for coming to my channel, and I guess I'll see you next time, dude. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun.
All right, dude, we are still live. The interview is over, but really appreciate, man. It was awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, so the only thing
I like this. This is a bit more casual, and also like compared to I sometimes go to a podcast and the interviewer like.
Yeah, we're still live, by the way. We're still live, but
This
okay.
is yeah.
This is
I'm open to talk about this, but there are some podcasts that I went to, and the interviewer really obviously didn't know much about the context, and they just like started asking questions on the spot.
Okay.
Sometimes it could be interesting, but it like really depends on how much the interviewer actually knows about the topic, and I think the questions asked here are relevant. So
yeah, I want to be
a lot of things
respectful.
are also,
I want to be respectful about your time and taking an hour of your time to coming to my channel. I want to be respectful about that. So I obviously prepare a full interview that I think makes sense for my audience, but makes sense for you too.
Yeah. Also, the enthusiasm is very, very cool. Yeah.
Appreciate it, dude. All right, so the only thing you have to do now is I think you just have to click on leave, and you do need to keep Chrome browser open so I can receive the full video and audio that is coming still from your side. Only 50% of it got uploaded, so you might have to wait like a minute or two.
Yeah,
okay?
I'll just keep the tab open.
Thank you so much. And chat, thank you so much for being on that side. Love you all. See you next time. Peace out.